One of the things we talked about at the very beginning of this session was that we wanted to at least acknowledge, because we didn't do this last session, we want to acknowledge and pay attention to our national delegation, our DC delegation. That's Senator Jim Risch, Senator Mike Crapo, Representative Mike Simpson, and Representative Congressman Russ Fulcher. And so the thing about Idaho, though, is that a lot of these guys don't really make as big a news. They're not out there making headlines and sound bites as you see from some other great folks like Rand Paul or Mike Lee or Thomas Massey or what's his name? Kennedy. What's his from Louisiana? John Kennedy, is that his name? These guys, they say, Josh Hawley, they have these great sound bites, these great moments. And as Idahoans, we always feel so left behind because we're like, why isn't someone as fiery as those guys here? And then they also put targets on their back because a lot of them are squishy, man. Their votes are bad. They go along to get along, and they just try to slide under the radar a little bit. But things are different nowadays because we're here, you're out there, we're all active, we're all paying attention, and we're all trying to call balls and strikes as we see it. But we have a real special guest today that I want to bring on who has been calling balls and strikes for a long time. He is the chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus. I'm going to have him on here to tell you all about what that does. So let's bring him in here. Mr. John Dennis, he's out there in California, my friend. I don't know how you do it still, but welcome to the program, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So explain to everybody what the Republican Liberty Caucus is. We pulled the scorecards. We'll show those here in a minute, but give us a little bit of background on what you guys do and how it helps folks like me and the rest of the folks here watching.
Yeah. So the Republican Liberty Caucus is a 527 for those who care about those sorts of things. But our main mission is to represent the liberty wing of the Republican Party, the libertarian wing of the Republican Party. Some of the folks who've been affiliated with us and who we've modeled ourselves after include Ron Paul and Rand Paul, in the Senate, Mike Lee, Thomas Massey. Going back, we're big fans of Robert Taft and Warren Buffett's father, who was a congressman out of Nebraska. And these are all folks who have one thing in common. They see the role of government as their role is to just protect your liberties. That's the role of government. That was sort of the revolutionary idea that upon which this country was founded, a great idea that came out of the Enlightenment. And that's where we think the country has gone off the rails by allowing government to get into lots of other things other than just protecting, your rights. So we watch folks. We endorse candidates. We take positions on issues. And one of the things that's caught a lot of attention over the last few years, we've been doing it for a while, but for the last few years in particular, it's caught a lot of attention, is we do these liberty indexes where we, after the year is over, we don't publish our position before. We go back and we take a cross section of votes in the House and votes in the Senate, and then assign points to each of those votes, and grade each member of the House, each Republican member of the House, and each Republican member of the Senate, and give them a score on a scale of 0 to 100. I'm sorry, Matt, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Okay. Let's pull up, guys. Let's pull up the Senate card here first. I want to kind of ask you. Yeah. So this is from your website. We pulled it here. So scroll down. One of the here's some of your top scorers. You highlight some of the lower end and your average. But the one thing I wanted to ask you about, because we're in Idaho, there's a few organizations here that do something similar. I mean, that if you're going to rate if you want to find out how your legislators are doing, you got to look at their votes, right? But some of these votes are very different than what we see here in Idaho, because a lot of them talk about voting for cloture. So it's not actually voting on a specific issue. So it sounds like some of this stuff is voting on a specific method or strategy. Can you explain a little bit about why you get so granular with some of these votes?
Well, without getting into specifics, we, a lot of times, Well, let's take a recent fight in Washington over the continuing resolution. We haven't passed a budget in, I don't know, 2 decades or something like that in Washington. And so sometimes these fights are procedural, but they have massive implications. So, like, for example, instead of voting to pass the continuing resolution, there should have been a vote on a budget, and we could have had actually 12 separate bills addressing different issues, as Congressman Thomas Massey wanted. So these are sometimes these procedural matters have massive implications as to the direction of Washington and then, of course, the direction of the country. This year we had a larger number of them, an exceptionally large number this year as opposed to other years. This year we also had, particularly and I think it was in the Senate, we had a lot of foreign policy related questions or votes, and that really impacted the scores. I mean, we should talk a little bit about the drift in the average score in the House and in the Senate for that matter. I can't hear you, man. I'm sorry. Terribly sorry.
Man, I'm having a real hard time with my button over here. Let's talk about the average score thing. Up at the top, if you guys can scroll to the top, there is the average score in the Senate was 46.
Which actually, believe it or not, is, I think, a slightly up from years past. By the way, just to remind your viewers, this isn't the average score of all senators or average score of Democrats. This is the average score of Republicans.
Right.
And I dare anybody to go look at that, look at the methodology, look at the bills we picked. If you don't understand them, read a little bit about them and tell us that, where you stand on those positions. And I would bet 9 out of 10 Republicans would choose what our position was every single time. So the reason why I say that is because that tells you that the average Republican senator is not voting the way Republicans should be voting. And if you go back up, I'd like to take a look at that, the average. Now, I will say, if you look at the sort of the top folks here, we had actually some pleasant surprises last year. Like Mike Braun as a senator last year scored really high. J.D. Vance in his first term was a very pleasant surprise. We didn't expect to get that out of him based on how he campaigned, for U.S. Senate. But he was a great scorer. Now, unfortunately, we lost them both. Mike Braun is now the governor of Indiana, and J.D., of course, is the vice president of the United States. But we do have some solid folks here, and people have bumped up their scores. Josh Hawley is up from where he was. He was a 70 last year. He's up, and really happy about that. Marsha Blackburn is up quite a bit. Josh Hawley's fellow Missourian is Eric Schmidt. He has a nice score here. They actually have the best Senate delegation of any state.
Yeah, well, then let's talk about Idaho here, because I was surprised to see that, because here in Idaho we're very strict when it comes to liberty. I mean, the folks out there are super passionate, and so when we looked at the score, and the average score for the House was 34, but when we looked at Idaho, the delegation from Idaho, Mike Crapo is at a 60. And Jim Risch was at I think 56 in this last score. And so they're both above average. But when you look at, like I mentioned, a couple of folks that always they always get their sound bites on the news programs, like John Kennedy and Ted Cruz. John Kennedy is a 50 and Ted Cruz is a 75. And so, a lot of times people, if you're not 100 or 98, they just want to write you off. But when you look at the average, I'm trying to figure out here, like, where do we as a large electorate, where should we be pointing our ammunition at? Because, people like Susan Collins and Murkowski are horrible, but here in Idaho, we don't really have anything to do with how they get elected. So when you do have somebody that's above average, I mean, we always want better, but it doesn't help when Trump puts out a tweet, backing Jim Risch, if you're not a Jim Risch fan,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
How do we parse all this stuff?
Yeah, I'm friends with Rand and Rand Paul, and we spent a lot of time together. Particularly last year, we spent a week in California traveling all over. And that was one of the reasons that Rand never really got around to endorsing Donald Trump. He endorsed him after the election because the president gets advice from different people, and he was choosing folks who weren't Liberty candidates in some of those primaries, and so that created some friction. And then I think we're right. I think Rand is right about that, because in the end, then these guys go and vote, and they vote kind of predictably.
Yeah.
Kennedy, by the way, and Cruz, their scores actually went up quite a bit. I'm happy,
good.
Because Cruz was way down there. He was down like, I think, 55 last year, which is shocking for a guy who presents himself as a liberty guy, but his voting record tells you a different story. As far as the senators in Idaho, I mean, they're not terrible. They're above average. They made some good votes this year, but I would say, given how Republican and frankly how liberty oriented the Idaho electorate is, they're kind of lagging. They're kind of disappointing. So one recommendation I would make is, impact and influence your senators, is make sure that they see this index. These guys pay attention to these things. I mean, Rand always wants to know when it's coming out. Thomas wants to know when it's coming out. They really pay attention. Paul Gosar was upset with us a few years ago because he only got a 90. And he wouldn't come on our Twitter space when we did the release on it. So and I like Paul, and it's sort of a minor thing. But yeah, they watch this very carefully. Even Justin Amash, when he was running for the Senate, went back and asked for all of our liberty indexes going back to the 2010, and created his own chart showing how well he scored on our index. So make sure that Rich and Crapo know that they're being tracked, and that they got to live up to to their job as defenders of liberty.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wouldn't hurt them to meet with some PR folks and come up with some good lines. I mean, it sounds petty, but you saw the opening of our show. Like, there are some fantastic folks here in Idaho who know exactly how to speak from the heart and defend liberty. And you want as a state like Idaho, you want your national delegation to speak that way. And oftentimes it doesn't come across as genuine when they do, if they ever do. And then when you compare it to some of their scores, then you kind of, it makes you wonder if you're really being represented the way that you should. So guys, let's put up the House again real quick, because we don't want to forget the House before we let John go here.
And I want to just make a quick plug here, Matt.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I mean, it's important that folks in Idaho join the Republican Liberty Caucus. Our strongest chapter is in Florida. They go up to Tallahassee every year for legislator days. And believe me, those folks show up because we are active. We got a strong volunteer base. Our endorsement means something, and they respond. Well, we have a great guy named Cornell Razor up there in that area, and he's the representative for the Republican Liberty Caucus in Idaho. Sign up at rlc.org. It's super easy to join, and connect with Cornell, and let's build a really strong chapter in Idaho. And if you guys do that, trust me, you'll have an impact and influence on your state legislators and your federal representatives as well.
Yeah, that's great. Cornell is fantastic. We're a big fan of Cornell. He's a pledge signer with our organization as well, and he definitely speaks from the heart. So that's good, folks. Okay, I've looked at the list here. Just by comparison, Fulcher is at a 76, which is pretty good, I would say. It's not too bad, not too shabby. Mike Simpson is at an 11. Let me repeat that again. Mike Simpson is at an 11, which is the same score as Dan Crenshaw, which I happen to run across. So at least we announced those scores here. I'm going to talk to Cornell Razor on this and I want to make sure that everybody knows how to get involved with him on this issue and on this stuff to keep these people at least notified, because there are other scoring outlets out there, but I think what you do here is particularly interesting, especially when it comes to just a lot of these procedural votes that prevent us from getting to a balanced budget. I mean, like you said, the fight that they had at the beginning here was like, can we at least all agree that you said we would? I mean, wasn't it Massey who said we were supposed to do this in September. You said if we do it in December after the election, but we have to get sworn in so we can do it in March. And now you're telling me we got to do it later. It's like, when are we going to start doing the balanced budget? Do you have any hope that they're going to do it in September now, like they've been promised?
No, not a ton. I think the only way that happens, Matt, is if we stay on them, really, put it out there. The one good thing about the president is that he follows social media, his staff follows social media, and if we can, push back, I think they'll pay attention. Also, telling was the amount of fundraising that Thomas did. Thomas does not like to fundraise. He's in a seat where he doesn't really have to, but he raised an inordinate amount of money, showing the president and his followers that people are with Thomas on this. This is the big change. Look, the executive orders are all fantastic, but frankly, they're junk food compared to the budget. Right. I mean, that's the meal. And to get something sustainable, something that's lasting, we have to address this budget, this federal deficit leading to the massive level of federal debt. The president's legacy will be completely, damaged if he does not address this issue. And so he's got to really bring Thomas into the fold and the liberty scene. And in that way, maybe we'll see some progress in September.
Yeah. Very good. All right, John. Well, where can people follow you and keep track of your work and get in touch if they want to start a chapter or we have a chapter here in Idaho, but how do people get involved?
Yeah, growing the chapter is really important. And I'm telling you, it'll have a big impact. So it's rlc.org, as in Republican Liberty Caucus.org, rlc.org. You can follow us on Twitter at our Liberty Caucus, and you can follow me at Real John Dennis.
Great. All right, John. Well, good to see you. We'll check back in with you again.
Love it.
Take care.
Look forward to it. Thanks for having me.
You got it, brother.
Cheers.
All right, folks. Very good. We'll take a short break. We'll be back and catch you up on the rest of what's going on in the House. They're back at it down there. So we'll be right back.
And that's exactly what happened. You want to pull the tape? You can pull the tape because we now got video.